Okay. Cord Tst meeting. What is today? October 24th. We looks like. Oh, there's David. Give him a second to join.
I have joined.
You have joined. Good. So we were just chatting. I know we're not going to get Mark, and we're not going to get Tio and Jono. They're at BBWF. Mark isn't, but he let me know he couldn't make it. David Boswell isn't going to be here either. So we'll be fairly short-handed. But the one we do have some of the parties involved here. So let's chat about containerizing OpenStack, which was part of the message in that OPNFB thing. So I think it's planned that we do I don't think we call it containerized OpenStack. I think we called it hardening OpenStack.
Yeah, that's what 99 Cloud calls it. They call it modernization, hardening, and bringing it to production. I think the phrase they use is bringing it to production. That they keep using that over and over again.
Yeah, that makes sense for them. We can figure out a name for it, but the intent is to do that. But so what we were just chatting about is we're still waiting for a bit more of a plan or information from 99 Cloud as to how they're going to be involved. We did see Marco on the email thread. I know, David, you responded to it. Is there anything we can accomplish on this front? Maybe there isn't.
I mean, it depends. I mean, what do we just need people to do the work, right? At one step, it is: can we get OpenStack up in containers anywhere, even as a sample, outside of Cord, right? Have we done that?
No, that's where we're waiting for.
99.
99 Cloud's going to help with that.
I guess it is 99 Cloud, not Cloud 99.
Yeah, you want to say Cloud 99, but it's 99 Cloud.
They did say in that announcement that they were using a Cola, or whatever it is, which is the previous version.
The OPNFB announcement said that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, is there any reason we can't just, leverage what they've done? I mean, it's all just a matter of pulling it into our processes as much as anything else. So it's clear.
I mean, is there? I don't know. I saw the announcement. I said, "Oh, it's choice, right?" Is what they label it. I'm like, okay, but they're both under the Linux Foundation. I don't know if the Linux Foundation is just becoming for lack of a better term, a dumping ground for any open source project that it can be, or is there some coordination within the Linux Foundation to coordinate these projects?
I think the form, dumping ground may be not quite the right word, but yeah, I don't think. I think they take all comers, and so harmonizing is a after the fact thing they attempt to do in explaining things, but I don't think there's any really strong effort to coordinate these.
Okay. I mean, at this point, it is 99 Cloud or some resources, whether they leverage what exists or go to the next version, right? That's relatively material, although I think we internally want to go to the next version. It's just getting the resources allocated and the time, get them to do the work, right?
Yep.
Or ask them to do the work.
Yep. Yeah, so we can ruminate about this, but I don't know that we're going to accomplish an awful lot. So the only action item here is just to make sure that we have a brigade ready and we promoted it at Cord Build, and hopefully by then we'll have something concrete from 99 Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time we spoke, I don't remember. I don't think it was last week. It was the week before that. 99. We were talking about a brigade, and we left the meeting unsure if uh, mm, I'm sorry, separate brigade is necessary or not. Mainly because we thought it was a pretty narrow use case. We thought maybe we can use either the XOS channel or the container brigade channel for discussion. And if it does turn out that the volume of discussion is heavy and it's very specific to Kola and OpenStack, we can create our own brigade. I think creating a brigade is in itself is not a problem, but participation is.
Well, I mean, the purpose of the brigade would be to help recruit other people, and
Right.
yeah.
So the last time I spoke with Yong Sheng, who is the CTO of 99 Cloud, he said that he's going to work on a design document that specifies what they're going to do as a part of their hardening and bringing to production set of tasks. I had requested them a couple of times, to start adding tasks to Jira so that we can follow. I do think that they have a strong intent to do this hardening. And I think we should follow up. So I'll follow up with them sometime later today if that is acceptable.
Yeah, that would be
And
great.
see
That
where
would
we
be
are with
great.
that.
Thanks. Was this other group link something?
Linker networks.
Linker Network.
So yes, so that is again a tiny company from Taiwan. We are approaching the Kubernetes implementation from the opposite end, mainly because it started off with me discussing with Jono and Theo out in the Menlo office what it would take for ONOS to work on Cord. And one of the things that Jono mentioned that we need an overlay network that is made of pure OVS switches. We have a few OVS-based overlay networks for Kubernetes, but they have a Linux bridge in the middle, mainly because OVS switch does not come with a standard IP address management service. So linker networks, I did a little bit of research, and one of the implementations was from linker networks, and I reached out to them, and independently Charles from the ONOS team introduced me to them, and they expressed great interest in trying to implement an OVS-based overlay network for Kubernetes, which does not use the Linux bridge. That's how this entire thing started.
Now, again, I keep meaning to talk to you about this. Why do we need this overlay bridge? I guess the problem, some sort of understanding or lack of understanding on my part as to what we're trying to do with Kubernetes, right?
Right.
Is it really to, say, orchestrate the containers that are part of Cord, or is it to, I don't know, I'm not clear on this overlay network and why it's needed. I guess that's.
I think the answer is both, David.
Sure. Yeah, it is both. So basically, there are two functions that we are expecting out of Kubernetes. One is to orchestrate the containers of Cord, and most of the containers of Cord, like OpenStack, are utility containers that will help orchestrate the rest of the system. The second purpose of Kubernetes is to be able to orchestrate VNFs themselves, and that's where this overlay network on Kubernetes that can be managed by ONOS comes in. So when you deploy a service through XOS, it speaks with OpenStack to create a service which internally talks to the VTN app of ONOS, and then ONOS communicates with OpenStack to identify the IPs and the MAC address mapping and stuff like that.
Yep.
And all of this happens on an OVS-based network, a pure OVS-based network. There is a overlay network that is created by the ONOS VTN app across all the compute nodes, and it connects them, and then it programs the OVS switches, and uses that overlay network to connect the VMs that are the VNFs. If and when we move the virtual network functions or have some of the virtual network functions as containers. And we want to have a hybrid system where we can have both a VM-based VNF, set of VNFs, and container-based VNFs on the same infrastructure. Then we will need Kubernetes also to be able to place the container-based VNFs on the same network. And for that, we need both Kubernetes as well as ONOS VTN to be able to recognize that overlay network.
All right. So yeah. So I think there's two areas where I'm not sure what the right word is. Not disconnect, but again, where my thinking has been going. And one is because we've been playing internally with some of this reactive network programming, and the extension of that would be actually leveraging Kubernetes layer 3 capabilities along with the kind of reactive layer 2 connectivity. And so when we talk about the VTN app controlling OVS and Cord, I keep thinking kind of what I'd say is on an alternate time path to that, where it may not be the VTN app, right? It may be kind of this reactive network programming, leveraging more of what's in Kubernetes. And I think that may change when we try to reach, the container world and the VM world, but I'm not sure how that would pan out.
Right. So maybe we can take this offline. So I do understand the reactive programming approach, but it's still not clear to me how that will work with VM-based VNFs. So we can talk more about it. This is based off of information that I got from the ONOS team. ONOS needs to program the OVS switches. There is no two ways about that. And currently it uses VTN. Even if we take out VTN and have a simpler add-on, ONOS app, it will still need to, that app will still need to program the OVS switches. I guess what I'm trying to say is from the ONOS team's point of view, ONOS has to have complete control of the OVS switches in order to be able to program it. Delegating to, I think you are and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're suggesting that ONOS delegates to Kubernetes that internally controls the OVS switches, the network. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know how that will work, because I don't know if Kubernetes understands OpenFlow.
Well, no, I guess the point is I'm not sure there'd be OpenFlow switches in some of this. I guess would be some of the.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So if it is not OpenFlow based switches, then ONOS is totally out of the picture. I see. Right. Yeah. So this work is very specific to ONOS. This work is very specific to trying to get ONOS based switches and VNFs working on those switches running. And that's where this is going. We were trying to see what it would take. Are there a bunch of manual steps? Can we automate some of this? Can we just run, ONOS? Do we need something else? So we just learned as a part of. So at the very least, this exercise shows the gaps. We found out that we will need an IP address management service. We will need a DHCP service. We will need a way for. We will need at least one ONOS app that will talk to Kubernetes, similar to a VTN app, or VTN needs to be extended, or something like VTN needs to like a VTN app needs to exist that talks to Kubernetes so that it can get the MAC address IP mapping, stuff like that. So we have come up with a bunch of requirements that will need to be fulfilled for a ONOS based for an ONOS based infrastructure to work. So at the very least, this is a learning exercise. When we started this, this was not intended to be something that would be like a reboot of Cord, or starting Cord from scratch from the other end. Though we did talk about it, in our brigade meetings, container brigade meetings, we did talk about having a pure Kubernetes-based Cord infrastructure. At least this exercise does not have that intent. This exercise is purely to understand what it takes to have ONOS VTN working on Kubernetes, and bring Cord elements in the middle, just to understand what the requirements are. The actual effort in container orchestrating Cord is from the other end, where we install Kubernetes as an additional infrastructure piece in Cord, and then containerize the utilities like OpenStack, like we just talked about, and then slowly move on to VNFs. That is the approach that I think in general as a team we decided and we are taking. But this other effort with linker networks is a purely researchy kind of expedition.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering. Well, and again, the brigade hasn't made a lot of progress in terms of concrete steps right now. We've done a lot of thought work that way, but I'm wondering if this is like two paths happening in the same brigade, if that makes sense, or it does make sense to break out some of this kind of investigative work into a separate brigade.
I see. A separate container brigade, you mean? Or a
Well,
research?
I mean, container brigade, you could argue is a bad name, right? Because it doesn't really specify what it's trying to accomplish.
Right.
And if there's a brigade that's kind of, let's call it, deploying Cord under Kubernetes, that's a very specific goal, versus deploying an all container version of Cord, i.e., no VM support, versus
I see.
Versus hybrid, versus kind of what we're doing. Is there room, or does it make sense to divide this up in terms of goals?
That makes sense to me, David. That makes sense to me. And I mean that second one is what we used to call light and write Cord. It is Kubernetes only.
Yeah, so I am at a disadvantage here, mainly because I don't know what the level of scope is of a brigade in general. This to me sounds like a pretty narrow scope. I really don't mind either way. But if we are going to have an official approach and an experimental approach as brigades, that's fine. I was just not aware where we draw a line. It feels like we are drawing a line in the sand, which in itself is okay as long as that's kind of that's kind of the accepted way of going about an effort. If we just talked about having a brigade for what 99 Cloud team is doing, and that itself seems narrow. I think if you're okay with having a brigade for that, I think there's no harm having two separate brigades, one that approaches from a pure Kubernetes kind of way of doing it, and another one that uses a hybrid way of doing it. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I guess I'm trying to channel David Roswell here, right? And I mean, originally I thought some of the scope around brigades were kind of what was that narrow focus where something could get done in like 3 to 6 months and the brigade would disband. They weren't necessarily meant to be a long-term entity.
I agree. Just also channeling David and others that keeping narrow focus and expecting them to finish their work and move on. I mean, I would rather risk having the focus too narrow, which means, well, you know what, 99 Cloud could have just stepped in and done it all by themselves. I would rather take that risk, I think, and keep it narrow.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, we can talk to David Boswell, and we can try and track these as separate efforts. But again, I want to be really careful about making sure that we don't consider this as an alternative Cord. I'm really reluctant to say that. Because
which one? Which one?
The linker networks effort.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I think we do want to keep us to in scope. I agree with you on that. I mean, using the old terminology, or trying to not overuse the word container, it seems that we have a hardened production ties OpenStack brigade, which likely leverages Cola, and we have a light and write Cord brigade, which includes a lot of factors in here. Yet it's still arguably a little on the broad side, but it's, you could describe the end goal, which is a Cord. It's a legit Cord design. It's not some parallel world, but it's one where the configuration only includes Kubernetes. And then there's a follow-on, which is arguably that's the hybrid.
I'm very reluctant to call the linker networks effort anything associated with Cord. It's just the beginning. It might turn out to be, like you say,
Oh,
Larry,
okay. So
a light and right card.
now I get where you're going, and I would agree with that, and I would think of them as a participant in this other broader thing. Slightly,
Right. So,
yeah, I agree with that.
so the efforts that the Linker Networks is doing will help with the official effort of container orchestrating Cord. That's the way I'm looking at it. Even
Yes.
even if we have Kubernetes just the way using Ansible, like I and Zach had a discussion a couple of weeks ago, even if we go down that route, eventually we will start thinking about VNFs in Kubernetes, and for that, this work will needed to be done anyway.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. I agree with that. Yeah. So now I'm being inconsistent, but the first one was very narrowly and well defined. The second one,
Right,
while it is well defined, has subparts to it.
right. So having two brigades, one for container orchestration of Cord, and another for light and write Cord is great. But I personally don't think the linker network effort falls in the category of light and write Cord. We can have a separate brigade for that, no issues. But then that would be a third
Well,
brigade, in
so
my
I
opinion.
think I think it would maybe be incumbent upon them to put forward a proposal and see if they could recruit more participants, or if it's something
Right.
that they're the only ones interested in.
Right. So they are a part of the Content Brigade channel, and I believe they're going to. I hope. I wish David Boswell was here, and I do believe they're going to be there for Cord Build. We can definitely talk more about them. At this stage, it feels like they plan to do this themselves because the scope is really narrow. An OVS based network for Kubernetes without Linux
Yeah,
bridge. That's the
I
scope.
think
Uh,
I think you're right. Now that I understand it better.
Yeah, but like David Bainbridge says, if you have ever worked in a commercial setting, things tend to explode once people start seeing the use of it. And I do believe that people might start thinking of this as a light and write code or a Kubernetes only code or whatever we might choose to call it. Um, I personally would like to steer very clear of that. But if it does turn out that that's happening, then yeah,
Then
we probably
we'll
should.
have to face that at a kind of a TST wide level. Is this part of the official
Right,
release or not?
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
it forks off. Who knows what happens there? Sort of
Right, right.
sort of in a similar vein, we have various companies or individuals step up with projects they want to work on, and it never rises to the level of brigade. It's their own personal interest or whatever. Another one very much like that is, and I see Scott, if you're still there. Um, STK was working with a Swarm, Docker Swarm based project. Have you followed any progress there? It never rose to the level of brigade, but they wanted to do it, and was some back and forth at the TST, and they went off and have been working on it. But I haven't seen the fruits of that yet.
This is the thing Hyun Soon was working on that was containers inside of
Yep.
instances.
Yep.
Well, there's been a guy who wants his swarm synchronizer approved that I've been meaning to take a look at. I wonder if that's them, and
It is.
if so, that would be code ready to integrate.
Yeah, it is.
That was a synchronizer that basically would start a VNF under Swarm. What was this? What's this do?
I'm not sure who you're waiting for an answer from, but yeah, this was a VM running Swarm containers, or I'm sorry, Swarm managing a set of containers.
Yeah, these containers were somehow linked into a VNF chain.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, and it was a fairly benign extension to the core data model. They
Yeah.
figured out how to do it, and that seemed like, well, let's see if that works.
It might
And
be interesting if they were to do a code merge to kind of get an update on what they've done and their capabilities, and because before it was kind of here's what we've planned. It'd be kind of interesting to have them come to the TST and say, well, here's what we've accomplished.
yeah, so Scott, I wouldn't view it as necessarily, and therefore it's officially released or anything, but we can certainly. I mean, again, whenever you have time, which is another matter, but um, if you have a chance to take a look at that, and maybe we can have them do a demo of it at some point, or do a walkthrough at a TST call just to help us understand it.
Yeah, it's I've been meaning to look at it. I just haven't got around to it yet. One patch looked fairly large. One I think was an empty repo at this time, but
I'm sorry,
it does show they're making progress.
Was there any patches to the core, or was this all self-contained?
I thought it was self-contained, although I wouldn't want to state that for certainty.
Okay, that was my understanding as well, but we should see. Does anyone have anything else?
I suppose, David, would you like to take David Bainbridge? Yeah, David Boswell is not here. David, would you like to take this discussion offline if you want to have separate?
Yeah, I think it would. You're going to be in Menlo this week?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's meet.
Let me figure out when I can get to Menlo. I have some time restrictions, but I suspect there's sometime this week I can get to Menlo, and I think if we could sit down with a whiteboard for a little bit and chat, that might be useful.
Yeah, I just realized this week somebody told me that you are actually based off of the Bay Area. I didn't know that. I thought for some reason you're in Canada. I really didn't know that.
No. Most of my company is, but I'm not.
I see. Okay, that works out really well for me. Yeah, excellent. So if you can meet this week, that would be great.
All right. I will check the agendas and my calendars and see what we can do.
Awesome.
Is there anything else? Anything about Cord build?
I've heard of that. What is that? No.
So I've been seeing activity, especially since you're there on the mCord side, putting together demos for Cord build. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, I do. Intel is trying to, well, I mean, along with us, obviously, we're trying to get the open source EPC all put in Cord 4.0 and demonstrate that. In the last minute, what happened was the open source EPC has also a tied-in RAN emulator that generates the mobile handset traffic synthetically, so that you can actually, without attaching a base station, you can run mCord completely. We have been using NG4T for that, but for Cord build, they told us that they were too busy. So in the last minute, we had to swap them with Spirent. There was a significant amount of compatibility issues with the open source EPC. Ping Ping and Intel folks and people here at ONF worked quite hard in the last 2 weeks to get it all resolved. And as of yesterday, everything now seems to be working. So the last step is to port everything into Cord. We will demonstrate that remotely. So there will be a Cord pod at ONF, and we will have a remote access to it.
And all of this then will be at a point within whatever, roughly 3-4 weeks after Cord build to be included in the release. You think that's still good?
Yes. So there are some logistics that we need to square off with these emulators, because as you would imagine, all of these emulators, be it NG4T or Spirent, that's their bread and butter. That they sell those to, and then that's their main product. So we will hopefully include them as binaries. But when people click on that to execute those VNFs, they will need to go to a web page and get granted maybe a temporary license beyond which they will need to pay. So we need to figure out the licensing agreements with all these companies.
So that's a realistic workload. Is there a for free, very simple, prove that you got an end-to-end path kind of thing that you can do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see this as a showstopper, frankly. So the timeline that we had for the 4.1 release, I think we will be ready as Amcor, and
Excellent.
we will have the open source EPC there, and there's even a chance that we might have both Spirent and NG40, and people can have their pick for the RAN emulation.
Okay, cool. So since we just did a little quick thing on mCord, I think on eCord, Scott would maybe know best here. My understanding is that China Mobile now has a 4.0 pod building on a pretty regular basis. Zach, that's...
Yeah, they managed to get it up, but and with help from Luca and me, I think they're waiting on for us to make them a tarball, the eCord source, and send it over, and then go through the process. I think we've figured out all of the issues with doing that
with eCord.
Well, first they were doing our card, now they're doing eCord.
Right.
I think there will be less trouble because we have the platform in a stable state in China.
Good. So my question, yeah, so either for both you or Scott, is that eCord tarball is how close?
Scott, do you have a better? I think that from my perspective, the build system's fine. It's a matter of the services.
I think it has to be pretty close. The services are well, they're migrated in whatever state they were in. So I don't think the local stack is fully functional because some things need to be added to VEE. But we basically, what we're running here, I think should run there.
So ignoring the tarball part of it.
Andrea and Mark were going to do some end-to-end past traffic tests, and I think once that's done, we're going to call it good and ship it to China. But that's I'm not sure that's done yet.
Okay. All right. So both of those are roughly in a state we were hoping they would be at this point. Is there anything else? All right. Well, that was a good working discussion. So thanks, everybody. We'll just break early today.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.